Coming up today, in an unprecedented move, visiting UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon announces plans to visit the interKorean Kaesong Industrial Complex this week. As the shadow of doubt grows, a top US military official joins other experts in saying he doesn't believe North Korea really test-fired a ballistic missile from a submarine, as Pyongyang recently claimed. Plus, raising the pressure on the Abe administration, hundreds of historians from around the world urge Japan to accurately address its sexual enslavement of thousands of Korean and other Asian women before and during World War II. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, May 20th, here in Seoul. Thanks as always for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this morning, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon, currently in South Korea on a 5-day visit, has managed to squeeze even more activities into his already packed schedule. The UN chief plans to head just north of the border on Thursday to the interKorean Kaesong Industrial Complex. Ban says he wants to do everything he can to contribute to improving North-South relations. Hwang Sang-hee starts us off.
Will the UN chief's visit to the Kaesong Industrial Complex bring peace to the Korean peninsula? At a press conference in the South Korean city of Songdo, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon revealed plans for a day trip to the joint business park on Thursday.
I reiterate my willingness to do whatever it takes to contribute to improving the interKorean relations and promoting reconciliation and stability on the Korean peninsula.
While there, he will meet with some of the 54,000 North Koreans who work at 124 South Korean factories at the complex, which is practically the last remaining form of interKorean cooperation.
The Kaesong project is a win-win model for both Koreas. It symbolizes a good way to tap the advantage of South and North Korea in a complementary manner.
Ban will not only be the first UN chief to visit the Kaesong complex, but the first to cross through the demilitarized zone in 20 years. What's more, as the trip comes amid heightened tensions in the region following North Korea's test firing of a submarine-launched ballistic missile and an ongoing wage dispute at the factory zone. As the UN chief, Ban has repeatedly expressed hopes to contribute to the improvement of inter-Korean ties by visiting North Korea. And some say this trip could eventually lead to a future visit to Pyongyang. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
More international experts are raising doubts over North Korea's claim that it successfully test-fired a submarine-launched ballistic missile. Early this month, Vice Chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, James Winnefeld, strongly called the claim into question, saying the North manipulated its recent test launch video to exaggerate progress in its SLBM development. During a discussion in Washington on Tuesday, the U.S. military official stressed that Pyongyang is years away from having such a capability. However, he added that should North Korea eventually develop its SLBM technology, it would present a serious danger for South Korea, Japan, and American service members stationed in the region. Experts in the field of education are gathered in Korea's western port city of Incheon for the UNESCO World Education Forum. Their mission is to try and lay out a roadmap that will ensure equal educational opportunities for all children around the world by 2030. Now, Chae-sun reports.
Celebrating the opening of this year's UNESCO World Education Forum, President Park shared a story of how education helped Korea and its people rise from the ashes of the war. She said it was the international community's united support that helped Korean children acquire knowledge and start dreaming about the future. The president said Korea will return the favor using its experience and advanced ICT applications to help learners around the world become responsible global citizens who respect human rights, diversity, and equality.
한국은 교육 정보와 경험을 공유하고자 하는 국가들에게 첨단 교육 인프라와 소프트웨어 컨텐츠를 갖춘 첨단 ICT 활용 시범 교실을 구축하고 교원 연수를 지원하면서 국제사회 내의 교육 격차를 해소해 나갈 것입니다.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said he's living proof of how education can determine the course of one's life.
Studies show that $1 invested in education can generate $15 in economic gain. If all students in low-income countries learn basic reading skills, more than 170 million people could be lifted out of poverty. Education is not a privilege. It is a birthright.
He also stressed that education can protect vulnerable members of society from violence and extremism, and it's the international community's responsibility to guarantee protection for 57 million children who don't go to school because of poverty or regional conflicts. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is visiting Korea this week, and the two countries held their first CEO forum in Seoul on Tuesday. Speaking at the event, President Park said cooperation between the two countries is just the beginning. Linking Korea's manufacturing innovation policies with Prime Minister Modi's Make in India campaign is a way to drive new growth in both countries. The Korean president also talked about creating synergy by merging Korea's cutting-edge ICT hardware with India's vast human resources, introducing a variety of Indian infrastructure and energy projects, as well as measures to cut back on red tape. Prime Minister Modi encouraged Korean businesses to seek opportunities in his country. More scholars from around the world are throwing their support behind a landmark statement that calls on Japan to accurately address its history of colonial rule and wartime sexual slavery. Nearly 500 international historians have signed the open letter, which was first issued by a group of 187 renowned historians and sent to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe earlier this month. This letter criticizes Japan for its distortion of wartime history, stressing that the country exploited tens of thousands of women under a systematic management of the military. It also urged Japan to say sorry for the suffering that it caused other countries during World War II. The move comes just months before Abe is scheduled to issue a statement in August to mark the 70th anniversary of the end of the war. And staying with Japan, and that country is pushing to list dozens of industrial facilities that use thousands of forced laborers from Korea and other countries before and during World War II as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Now, as you'd expect, Korea is not happy at all with this and has made its feelings very clear to the head of the UN agency, who is here for the World Education Forum. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
UNESCO Director General Irina Bokova says nothing has been decided on regarding the 23 industrial sites Japan has registered for the UNESCO World Heritage List. Speaking to press at the World Education Forum in Seoul on Tuesday, Bokova suggested that Korea's concern over Japan's efforts might be better resolved through open talks.
I personally have encouraged both sides to engage in a dialogue. I know that there will be a bilateral meeting between Japan and the Republic of Korea, and I hope that there will be a solution found.
Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se met with Bokova earlier in the day to convey Seoul's strong opposition to the listing of facilities related to Japan's wartime atrocities. During Japan's colonization of Korea from 1910 to 1945, Tokyo coerced hundreds of thousands of Koreans into slave labor. Roughly 60,000 of them were forced to work at 7 of the 23 industrial sites that Japan has put up for World Heritage status. As far as Seoul is concerned, Tokyo's campaign clearly goes against the universal values of UNESCO. The South Korean government plans to appeal the application to UNESCO, hoping to sway voting members before the final decision in Bonn, Germany on June 28th. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News, Seoul.
The defense ministers of Korea and Japan will hold their first bilateral talks in 4 years later this month on the sidelines of a security meeting in Singapore. Japan's Kyodo news agency reported Tuesday that Seoul's defense minister Han Min-gu and his Japanese counterpart Gen Nakatani are expected to talk about speeding up an agreement on sharing military information. The Japanese minister will also introduce Tokyo's new guidelines for US-Japan defense cooperation. More strife for Korea's main opposition party. Plans to launch a reform panel this week have already run into heavy internal resistance. Our Ji Myung-gil has the details.
The head of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy, Moon Jae-in, proposed the panel in an attempt to salvage the deeply fragmented party ahead of next year's general election.
I will lead the New Politics Alliance for Democracy to glory in next year's general election as we overcome current hardships.
Moon said the panel would discuss reforms, including ways to diffuse party tensions and methods to ensure transparency and fairness in candidate nominations. However, he doesn't have the support of some of the party's veteran lawmakers.
I don't see any difference between the soon-to-be-launched reform panel and the current innovation bureau. Moon promised to achieve results by June, but I doubt it.
A number of senior lawmakers have also criticized Moon's decision to launch the panel unilaterally. They also blame him for not taking swift action after the party's overwhelming defeat in April's by-election. The NPAD's former co-leader Kim Han-gil has even refused to participate in the reform panel. The dissent has grown out of Moon's failure to tackle feuds between the party's leading factions, the pro-Nor group, supporters of the late former president Roh Moo-hyun, and the non-Nor group, which holds the pro-Nors liable for recent election losses and dwindling public support. The non-Nor faction want Moon to step down to take responsibility for the party's by-election defeat. So far, he's refused, accusing them of initiating a power struggle within the party. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, China's slowing growth is very negatively impacting Korea's exports. A report by the Korea Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade shows the country's exports grew on average 1% annually from 2011 to 2014. That is the slowest pace since 1970, and that is when related data was first compiled. It also marks a huge drop from the 11.9% average annual growth reported from the year 2000 through 2008. The Institute says increased overseas production in export-focused industries also contributed to the fall. The head of the World Bank says the United States has dropped its resistance to the China-backed Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Jim Yong Kim told Seoul-based Yonhap news agency on Tuesday that Washington is encouraging active cooperation with the AIIB. According to Kim, U.S. Treasury Secretary Jack Lew has welcomed the establishment of the new bank. Previously, Washington seemed to be concerned the bank would extend China's already considerable influence here in Asia. The AIIB has 57 founding members, including South Korea. The US and Japan did not sign up. Now, it's going to be the largest recall of a consumer product in US history. Under pressure from US authorities, Japanese airbag manufacturer Takata has agreed to declare airbags in some 33.8 million US vehicles defective. Explaining the reason behind the recall, the US Department of Transportation and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration said on Tuesday that the chemical that inflates the airbag can explode with too much force and this could potentially spray pieces of metal and other dangerous debris into the passenger compartment. And they say the faulty inflators have been responsible for at least 6 deaths worldwide. Now, 10 major automakers, including BMW, Ford, Honda, Mazda, Nissan and Toyota, but no Korean automakers, have already issued recalls for around 17 million vehicles, but Tuesday's announcement has almost doubled the number of vehicles that will need to be recalled to almost 34 million. Just to give you some context, that's nearly 1 out of every 7 cars on US roads today. Now, death is often portrayed in works of art as an attempt to understand it, and an opera about that very topic is being performed at the Korea Opera Festival, currently taking place at the Seoul Arts Center in southern Seoul. Our cultural correspondent Kim Ji-yeon reports.
If death were to be expressed in song, then the opera Il Trittico, a masterpiece by Giacomo Puccini, would say it all. This omnibus work is comprised of 3 one-act operas. Each interprets death differently, as a state of hell, purgatory, and heavenly release. In particular, the soprano who stars in the second opera, Nun Angelica, played by Kim Eun-hee, stands out. In her aria, she expresses a desire to see her dead son before she meets her own death.
It's very powerful. That aria is a very powerful aria. Every single time I sing that aria, my heart's just beating like a crazy. Because, you know, the mother love's just overpowering.
Now, operas are known to have sad and dramatic endings, but in the finale of the Il Trittico, it somewhat ends on a comical note. Can you tell us more about the ending of the play?
In this opera, you have three kinds of death. And the last one has a little bit, you know, cynical approaching to death. Everyone has their eagerness and their, you know, hope, wishes that shows humans, you know, desire. So it shows a little bit, you know, oh, probably that's me. You know, you can see that, oh, that person's just like me, or my father, or, you know, my aunt, something like that. So you can really connect to some characters. It would be fun.
It's one of the 5 pieces at this year's Korea Opera Festival, which runs until June 7th. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, that is all we have for now. We do hope to see you at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye.